Well, thanks everyone for turning up again, and this is the sixth session now that we're doing of the series where we're looking at the people who actually make the art world work. And I think we've had some really interesting sessions so far, but I think today is probably going to be one of the more interesting sessions, looking at something that I think that yourselves you don't really often see in terms of art law, but is exceptionally influential, would you say, in the background of what we do.
Yes.
To be honest with you. So please can I have a large welcome for Amanda Gray from Mishcon de Reya. Thank you very much for coming here today. I'm going to contextualise the Mishcon de Reya brand and the journey to where they are today. Lord Mishcon rabbi, as Arnold Mishcon, who immigrated from Poland, a teacher. They were from the West Country as well. Victor, sorry, you've thrown me slightly, David, so thanks for that. But Victor Mishcon, the gentleman here, was born in Brixton, so just down the road in South London, on the 14th of August 1915. He was a pupil of the City of London School, in common with a variety of other leading lawyers of the time, such as Mr. Fox and leading human rights advocate Lord Leicester of Herne Hill, QC. He went on to qualify as a solicitor in 1937. Aged just 22, he took the audacious step of setting up his own firm, Victor Mishcon & Co., a one-man office in Brixton, just down the road from here. He joined the Labour Party in 1945, worked his way through Labour councils, eventually rising to the heights of Shadow Lord Chancellor from 1990 to 1992. His firm went on to represent Lord Colombo, Geoffrey Archer, Gerald Ronson, Ruth Ellis, and Prince Diana in her divorce. And a really interesting thing, which I'm not sure you necessarily know, but I heard it separately, you might do, because in 1995 he was awarded the Star of Jordan by King Hussein. And for his 80th birthday, King Hussein invited him to his palace and hosted him and had Shimon Peres as his waiter.
Gosh, isn't that incredible? It's a really lovely. I have also not seen that photograph before.
It's just lovely,
So in our offices, there's a more formal one. I never met him. He was before my time. But the partner I worked very closely with, and practitioner John Carron, knew him and worked with him and for him. And it's a more formal portrait with a bowler hat and an umbrella. He was quite a formidable gentleman by all accounts. So, but that's it's a softer photograph, so it's nice to see.
Well, somebody who could instigate the Jordan Peace Accords would have to be quite a formidable character, really, and probably very missed in today's day and age.
I think his drive as well, and the way the genesis of the firm is something that's reflected now. We're a different firm now. I've been there for 15 years working within art law, and it's grown. There's obviously more corporate, and there's been lots of changes, etc., emerging people. But there's certainly the essence of the lawyers that drive it, the ones that bring in the business, the ones that have the entrepreneurial flair, the types of clients we attract, very much high net worth, ultra high net worth, but entrepreneurs, self-starters, people with that kind of drive.
So, in a nutshell, art law.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? So
yeah.
I talked about when I joined 15 years ago. My background was art history. I wanted to be an artist. Then at some point I got into rights distribution and decided I was going to be a producer, TV producer. And I was doing lots of running around, then turned into business affairs, and I was working with lawyers, then I qualified. And obviously it gets further and further away from art. I qualified into crime and criminal defence, so I worked in the East End, and I really enjoyed it. I had a great time. I really liked the client base, and I really enjoyed it. But there came a point where I was missing art, and I can't remember how this happened, and it was a time, I have to say, when Google wasn't in existence, but I must have Googled art and law, and came across Mishcon's, and came across Karen, sent my CV, and she was one of the leading lights and one of the forerunners in terms of art law. It wasn't really a thing. It was a thing in New York. it was recognised as a specialism in New York, and not only as a specialism in New York, but a specialism with subspecialisms as well. So you should be asked questions. So what are you going to specialise in?
Yeah.
Are you going to specialise in contract work? So all the transactional things that you might come across. Are you going to be litigator, specialise in this area? Are you going to be dealing with restitution? And at that time, probably more narrow, we'd be just looking at Holocaust looted art. So works of art were looted during the Second World War period. Here, it wasn't in existence, and even amongst our legal peers, like art law, that's not a thing. You've got contract law, you've got tort law. What do you mean? What do you mean art law? And it's only until latterly, really, that it's developed into a known specialism, and it very much is. So I helped set up and co-chair the Art Lawyers Association last year with Martin Wilson of Phillips, General Counsel. And in terms of art law itself, we have legal directories, and there's now, it's a much more wanted area in terms of development. Now, what art law is, it could be anything, in terms of anything that touches or works around the art market. So I have a team of 10 lawyers now that just do art law. They might do some luxury asset work as well. But art law itself can be transactional work. So it can be contracts, so sale and purchase agreements. It can be loan agreements. So when artworks go off, and I know you deal with shipping and handling, so when arts go off to museums, you'll see artworks go off, there'll be a loan agreement in place that covers everything from shipping, insurance, how it's going to be exhibited, the term of the exhibition, any intellectual property concerns around it. So is it going to be merchandise? Is there going to be merchandising around it, etc. Then we sort of a middle area where it's not litigation, but it's regulatory and also advisory work. So we might be advising clients on collections. So we might be helping clients that they have a collection of artwork. They might be looking to do legacy planning. They might be thinking, right, okay, so I collect old masters, but I know that my children have absolutely zero interest in old masters. I know I've got some museum quality works there. Can you help me with that? What
do I do?
What do I do?
Going
Exactly,
forward? Absolutely.
Exactly. And there are tax considerations around that as well.
Huge tax considerations.
So there might be great things like nearing the end of my life. Acceptance in lieu, or there are other schemes available. What about gifting, lifetime gifts? So things around that, through to regulatory. So I might be dealing with, you might probably be aware of the 5th Anti-Money Laundering Directive, which is a very dry title, but it names art market participants. And the reason why art is targeted is obviously art is often highly valuable and highly portable, and HMRC and all the rest of them go around pitching. This is probably where money might be laundered, etc. So it names art market participants. We advise galleries and those art market participants, might be agents, about their obligations and what they should be doing. So there's a regulatory piece around that. Through to thinking about digital art, and certainly this is something coming out of the pandemic. There was a flurry of activity which has dwindled around NFTs. But also around selling on platforms. I've been inundated by people who wanted to sell art and other, I don't like the term assets, but assets online, on platforms. And this is a long thing, it always comes back. It's never really flown. I know something really properly done with people who've approached me, fractional ownership, things like that.
It's a very, very contentious area.
It is, and also it's not an area that I find particularly attractive. And obviously help clients with, but certainly around that, there's obviously a regulatory piece. So depends how you structure it, but then there's financial regulations because it's been treated in a very particular way. So there's that kind of piece as well, and that's sort of the middle area. But there's lots of other advisory work that we do behind the scenes. Reputation is a common thing with everything that's contentious, and also can be a transaction as well, in terms of ownership of art. The fact even that you're buying or selling art can have a reputation impact. The fact you bought something that isn't actually correct, so that reflects on your judgment. Did you not do the right due diligence? Were you duped? These issues can be very sensitive if you're a high net worth or an ultra high net worth, because it might affect how you are considered in your wider business life, as it were. And we've certainly seen that and guided clients through that. And then at the other end, which is, and I'm a hybrid lawyer, but I do a lot of litigation and fights, is the fighty end, which is either approaching litigation and disputes and trying to sort those issues out for clients before you get to litigation, or you have clients that will want to bring a claim or are defending a claim or drawn into a claim as well, and then you're in full-blown litigation in court. And before that, or alongside that, you could be mediating or assisting clients with mediation or other forms of dispute resolution. So it's a whole spectrum, and I've got lawyers. That for me is art law, and I work with a wider sphere of colleagues within the firm on issues that might touch upon banking finance, so lending and art. Mm-hmm. So you might have people that are using the art as an underlying security for a loan, and that itself is contractual, but also can lead to due diligence issues as well. So some people have just signed those, as we know from, you might be familiar with the case of Indigo Philbrick. It was widely published 2 years ago and all over the art.
Oh, really? No,
right. Okay, so Indigo Philbrick was he was the golden child of art dealership, very young, deemed to be the golden boy that was going to be the next big thing as art dealer. Right. And he was seen around a lot in terms of auction houses bidding for clients on very, very high quality blue chip works. And he worked with Joe Joplin, and he moved on. He had his own dealership, etc., and his own circle of friends, etc., and bought and sold artworks for them. What started to become apparent was that the number of works were owned. You'd need 300% of an artwork. 3 people thought they owned an artwork themselves outright, or they had shares in artworks. It became apparent through an ongoing case in New York involving Portrait of Picasso by Stengel, when 2 people who thought their work had been sold buying Indigo approached the auction house and said, well, where are the sale proceeds because you sold it? So hang on a minute, you can't both own it. And it started to unravel, and everything started to unpick from there, when it became apparent that Indigo had been selling works or shares of works that either didn't exist, the artwork didn't exist, or selling artworks multiple times. On top of which is the security for loan point, he secured a loan with a well-known lending house for art in the US on artworks that he didn't loan authority to obtain the loan on those artworks, and something happened. So either those works were swapped in, swapped out. There's the whole thing. So basically, he committed a fraud. So he got a loan and he never repaid the loan.
So was that? I mean, prior to that case being exposed, then was it because the rules and laws behind it were much more laissez-faire, or is it? I mean, obviously fraud is fraud, but should he have known to do certain due diligence, or did this sort of the area of due diligence and the area of art law, as you said earlier on, that it's still progressing? Was there a possibility then that he might not have? I mean, was there any innocence in it at all, or any? I mean, I'm not trying to stick up for the guy, but what I'm saying is could there be just been a case of him not understanding the situation? He understood completely.
It was a deliberate act, and he disappeared. He disappeared. There was a worldwide search for him, and it was a great story. He turned up on a desert island, rescuing dogs. He's a very public figure. He's got a partner who's in the public eye as well. Anyway, he was arrested, taken to New York, and he's now serving time. He was found guilty. Right. And there's someone else now who worked with him who's now been brought in.
When was that?
About 2 years ago. He's still serving time now.
How much time did he get?
I don't know, but it was a significant sentence. I think he's due out soonish. As soon as he was arrested, he was incarcerated. He has been penitent in his conversation since about, but his view, his commentary has been that it wasn't just him, and it was a prevalent thing. There was anger that there are some elements of this, but there were deliberate acts of
the word still deliberate
and dishonesty. His steps were taken in order to get money out of people for nothing. So there were people out there who thought they owned artworks, and those artworks that existed. He said there were works on consignment. I mean, it's one of those things. It's a tangled web. Once you start lying, it's a tangled web. I'm amazed he managed to keep it all together as long as he did, because it becomes so complicated. But it was a deceit in order to get money.
And have any regulations been tightened on the back of it? Any learnings on the back of it, or is it just simply it was deceit, or is the art world going, oh, hang on a minute, that shouldn't happen, and shouldn't happen, and won't happen again, because we're now going to put X regulation in place to make sure that doesn't happen?
I think you raised an interesting point about due diligence. So it's a key element. There's often, everyone says, oh yes, I've done due diligence, I've done an art loss register check, or that's the very least you can do. You should always do more thorough. Who am I doing business with?
Exactly.
And on the individual, would I buy a cup of tea from them, let alone an artwork for X million? 2, have I seen the artwork? Does it actually exist? In a lot of cases, these artworks didn't exist. Have I seen documentation? And have I done due diligence around the work? Now, the problem is, and this is why the art world really smarted, that you all know it's a very social, tight-knit world. It's built on relationships, etc. He was somebody's friend. He was people he was selling to his friend. They trusted him.
Absolutely.
And it was a massive breach of trust.
Yeah.
So there's a problem there. If anything, and this is something that comes up time and time again when we help clients who have been treated dishonestly, or they've been duped in a deal, that they, particularly if they're new to the art world, they've entrusted a dealer or they've entrusted an advisor. And things might start off really well. It might all be fine, great deals. They buy something, it goes in value, or they can see it's great artwork. Then things start to go wrong, and either wrong work started being slipped in, etc., or the relationship sours. They start taking liberties with the individual.
And I guess if one or two people within the business or within the art world in general are doing it, it becomes just naturalized that's. Other people go, well, it must be okay. He's doing it. It must be, it's fine. They don't. They set their suspicions and their guard down. I guess. I
think so. In the degree, I don't think at any time it is acceptable conduct, but maybe the barometer of it becomes a bit blurred about what is okay and what might be sharp practice. I think that's the problem. A lot of the time, the art world, and you hear this, the art was meant to be unregulated. I don't actually buy that. I think it's always been regulated within the framework of law. Here, a crime was committed, and he was found guilty, and he is serving time in the US. And there have been other earlier, it's very much like a Ponzi scheme here. Yeah. There are other earlier examples where there have been other art crimes as well, where you have an agent in a complex chain of a sale and purchase chain, and the monies are just taken in the middle, and the seller will say, I never received the monies, and the buyer says, well, I paid the monies, and it's obviously it's disappeared in the middle. That happens a lot. I think where things need to come back to basics is due diligence, in terms of if you're buying art, you're selling art, whatever, what are you doing with due diligence?
How would you define due diligence?
I would define it as a broad set of searches that one would undertake. Either if you're on the selling side to make sure you aren't exposing yourself to a claim further on down the line, or if you're on the buying side, a broad set of searches which can be flexed to quite a detailed level that might be commensurate with the value of the artwork or your want. to ensure that what you're buying is correct. So what you're buying is correct. So is the artwork, for example, we'd be looking at, do I think I'm getting unique work? Or actually am I buying a 1 of 100, because that will have an effect on value. Is the artwork I'm buying authentic? And how can I establish that? Are there any issues with ownership? Who am I actually buying from? Now that sounds really simple, but you'll be surprised. A lot of people find that it's not actually an individual. It might be a trust structure that owns it. It might be something more complex. Particularly it's very high value because they would have wrapped the ownership around in a particular way to be cost effective, or etc. So there are various things around that.
And that alone is something you've got to look into as well, isn't it? Very
Totally.
much. You've got to resolve. You just got to unpick all those component parts.
Absolutely, absolutely, and particularly if you can't. You know, if somebody's selling an artwork, they've got to be selling an artwork that they actually own. So in terms of passing the title, etc. There are other considerations. Has it been imported and exported? Are there tax issues around it? What are those restrictions? If it's an antique, etc., you've got to be looking at other things. We've had issues to do with CITES, rare woods, ivory, etc. That has to be kept an eye on as well. Condition I've mentioned as well. And those issues are heightened potentially if you are lending monies against an artwork, if you're a lender or advise lenders, because you're looking ahead as well. You're saying, right, okay, well, Mr. Borrower, you can borrow X amount of money for me and we'll take this artwork as security, but I want to ensure that in 5 years' time, if you renege on the loan, I'll be able to sell this artwork. So you're almost not just buying it for the value it is now, but you're thinking, right, what's the track record of this artwork in terms of sales, up and down? Is it something that I will get my money back, or am I going to lose out in terms of the money's there? So then,
I mean, everything you're saying so far, I can see it working with estates of deceased artists, for example, primarily. Obviously working with living artists as well. But is there a different type of sensitivity with living artists as well? Because there must be some form of reputational risk, for example, if how can I put it? If art is being bought and sold on the market in a kind of, some people use the term flipping way, for example, etc. It can have an effect on the artist and the artist's reputation and their make, what they're doing really. Is there any point when artists come in and they say, I'm not happy with the market at the moment. I'm not happy with what's happening with my work out there. Do you have to look at that side of things as well?
Yes, absolutely. And I work with those. I mean, there are two sides, obviously, with that argument as well, in terms of the term flipping means acquiring artworks at a very early stage of an artist's career, so early careers artists, and then somebody comes in and they sell their work somewhere else for a lot more, and obviously it skews the market, as it were, in terms of value. Now, artists have something that's been a balancing out of power in terms of artists that, hang on a minute, that this really isn't on. Some have stepped in and said, right, okay, in for a penny, in for a pound. I'm going to go to the places that you are flipping. For example, an auction house in, say, Hong Kong, and I will sell my artworks there. Yeah. Or they will try to bring in, and they're not being enforced as yet. It's not being, I nearly had a case on it, and then it didn't happen, where there's a non-resale clause that's imposed. And it can either be imposed, if an artist is selling, if they're represented by a gallery, the gallery might seek to impose a non-resale clause within the sale agreement, okay? And what they will say in that is, okay, you, buyer, can buy this artwork, but I'm going to impose this non-resale clause. Either I have first dibs. If you want to sell it within 5 years, you've got to come back to this gallery, and we will say whether we want to buy it first. Or there'll be, you can't sell at auction. Or there might be some other term that will seek to control the owner's ownership of that artwork in the future sale. Now, There are a few, it's a hot topic and it will continue to be for a while, because I might turn around to the buyer and say, well, hang on a minute, I'm not going to agree to that because that's my property. That's my property.
Which is,
yeah,
to an extent.
Yeah, so I want to quietly enjoy my property. It's up to no one's business. It's no one else's business.
Yeah.
So there is a wider, a really interesting conversation about, well, does artwork occupy a different space than, say, my hat? Is it something else? You know, I can do what I like with my hat. I can burn it, what have you.
Yeah.
I can sell it tomorrow for 200 quid, even if it's 10 or what have you. So that there are those kinds of questions. So there's a bigger debate around that. In terms of that, they're yet to be enforced, but it's backwards and forwards in relation to that. Similarly, artists also may sell direct as well, and they might seek to impose that. On a practical level, what artists and their representatives do is they will be, with that in mind, that they want to make sure that the artist's career is properly developed in a way that they want to curate and nurture. What they might do is that they will vet who purchases the artwork. So they will go very much back to due diligence again.
Yeah,
they will look to see, right, well, okay, so Amanda wants to buy this artwork, but is she the kind of person we actually want to buy the artwork? Is it going to be to the benefit of the artist? Often the answer is no. But you know,
I mean, or the artist can make that decision.
Yes.
And is influential in it as well.
Completely.
You know,
completely,
and like, you know, they're now they are in that process of control. That the more established artists are also creating their own, and have been for a while, their own gallery, museum spaces.
Yes.
As well, in order to keep that reputation or that control, and who can buy and who can see, and it's, I mean, obviously, I mean, I don't know if in historical terms, have you ever get any reference points to that historically? Because I can't see any reference points where it's happened before, where that level of artist has so much influence on controlling their own work.
No, it's interesting, isn't it? I suppose that the relationship, the genesis of artists has changed somewhat. I mean, you have, going back to Caravaggio, you have the relationships of the patron and the artist, but it's very much, it's the other way around. The patrons say, Tobias is too worldly or what have you, he's not godly enough to do it again, and you have to do it again, or you have a dispute. Now, I think it's with the sense of very philosophical, but again, it's the sense of the artist as an individual, which came about with people like Caravaggio, I suppose, to a degree, but the artist as a rock star, the artist as something else, and then that's the change of power.
Yeah.
So then, but practically, they haven't had that. There has always been an imbalance. It's always been a David and Goliath conversation around artist versus gallery. They've always been at the back foot. Even now, there are artists who are very household names. It's a fight for them to necessarily get what they should be entitled to, and certain contractual arrangements. Whether that's, I can't talk about this on, but that's why I'm kind of dancing around. But things like, for example, I will have artists who are very well known, who have collaborated with, say, fashion houses, or collaborated with corporates, and there's been such a tussle and a big contractual negotiation, and a lack of understanding really on some of the other side about what they are and aren't entitled to. And that could be balancing not only the physical artwork, but also the intellectual property, which is the commercial bread and butter, so it allows them to have control over reproductions, etc. And further.
And I think that the development of IP, intellectual property, over the past X number of years is probably one of the drivers to the change in the relationship, and to a certain extent, because 100 years ago intellectual property, I guess, wasn't necessarily a thing, was it? Really, or was it, as it is now, and defendable as it is now?
I think artists are more alive to what they potentially do because they want to earn a living from it.
And should.
And absolutely. And artists, you have the physical art, the physical artwork, etc. Alongside that, you have a set of what are known as intangible rights. So with that are intellectual property rights in terms of commercial IP rights. So that enables me, say, as an artist, to take an image of my work, to license it out, to supermarket to use in their hoardings, to use in their bags, to use in their ad, and then I get paid for that. That would be the remuneration there. Alongside those commercial sets of intellectual property rights are artists' moral rights. So that means that for my artwork, Paul can take it and maybe use it in a derogatory way or claim it as his. And treat it in that way. So again, that's a protected right over me. Sitting alongside those rights, which in this jurisdiction are covered by the CDPA, Copyright Design and Patents Act, alongside that are artist resale rights, which are another form of, they're a royalty, and they tie to qualifying sales for the physical artwork. There's no qualification for it.
Yeah.
That enables a very small, amount of money, another income stream really for artists.
Yeah.
And that, you're familiar with DAX and ACS, they're the ones that are the collecting agents for that. So you've kind of got that, you've got the physical and the...
Just going back to the resale right,
Yeah.
With that resale right, that royalty, would that kind of be the whole lifespan of the artwork's kind of life? So if it's like resold multiple times, would that resale kind of royalty, would they get that every single time the artwork is sold, or would it just be at like its first initial sale?
So it doesn't apply to the first initial sale. So for example, if you're the artist, it actually, for the artist, it covers the lifetime of the artist plus 70 years. So it's a similar price back. But in terms of when it applies, you've got the first sale, say from the artist to Paul, that doesn't apply. That's not a qualifying sale. It has to involve an art market professional. You have to be, as an artist, an EEA state artist. It has to be at a certain entry level in terms of value. And then on top of that, you've also got, there's a couple of exceptions, but then you have to have this qualifying sale involving an art market professional moving along. But you're right, so you have the artwork, it's sold. Once you have all the necessary requisite elements of a qualifying sale, and use the artists you don't collect. If you didn't elect anyone, it would default to DAX. If you did elect a resale or collecting society, you could either choose ACS, Artist Collecting Society, or DAX, and they are there to monitor. They've got obviously various analytical tools, but say you were selling at a auction house, they would be looking at the sales to see if there are any qualifying, any of that, their stable of artists were popping up, and then they would say, Christie's, blah, 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 can you provide us with information of Paul's sales for the last quarter? We believe you've got some qualifying sales, and then should be reported back. Galleries should be doing the same, and obviously that there's a little bit more transparency with auction houses because their records are available online and everyone can see. And then they have to provide the information to the collecting society, and then a royalty is generated. At the very top level though, and this is where I think it comes down, at the very top level, the cap is €12,500. So for example, if you're a niche poor and you sold at a certain level, it's not very much. And it's also, the amounts of money can be helpful to artists at different stages of their careers, whether they're reaching the end of the careers or they're starting out early in their careers. But it's worth looking into, certainly if you're an artist, about getting your name registered on DAX, because it's another potential income stream if the artwork is sold at the right level, if it has all the qualifying aspects.
And do DAX always collect that amount and provide it to the artist directly? So if it was from an auction house or a gallery, that royalty, would that go directly to some like a third party before being provided to the artist?
Yeah, I believe so. So I think it's funneled through DAX. DAX collects it. So you'd never get an artist going to an auction house doing that. So it would go directly to DAX. They would hold it, and they would take a percentage for their work, and then it goes on to, then it's referred on to the artist in question.
That's right. Yeah.
And then you have scenarios where there's sort of orphan art, there are people who aren't claiming royalties. So back in the day, and this is a very long time ago, there was the DAX had collected lots of royalties, but they had no one to distribute to, because it was obviously artist estates. So initially it only applied to living artists, and then they lifted a derogation in 2012. That was the 1st of January 2012. So then it applied to qualifying artist estates as well. I remember at the time it was deemed to be another great debate within the art world. Galleries were up in arms, saying this is really onerous on us. We do a lot to support artists at the beginning of their careers, etc., etc. We're the ones going to have to put in the infrastructure to run this, which they did. And I have every sympathy. If you're a one-man band who's trying to do this, it's a lot. It's a bit different if you're a big auction house, because you can kind of slot it into your financial infrastructure. So it's very onerous. So, but I don't think it would have the big impact that it wasn't the death knell that we necessarily thought. In hindsight, I'm more concerned about Brexit.
And also, it's just become another negotiating tool as well in purchasing and selling.
Yes, and you can sort of allocate it so that the royalties absorbed either by the buying party or the selling party.
It's just simply a negotiating it's just it gets in the way sometimes of the purchase, but it is a negotiating factor.
Yes,
which is used. And
it's certainly worth. If you're doing a selling purchase agreement, seeing you're involved with sales and purchase art, etc., worth seeing how it's reflected in that agreement, who's going to be responsible.
Exactly.
If it's not an auction ones, it's just kind of absorbed into the whole thing. But if you're doing something privately, just have a look there. But it's got to involve, it's got to be a qualified set involving an art market professional.
And we've opened up so many things I'd love to unpack about art market professionals and things, and who really is art market professionals these days, and who thinks they're art market professionals as well. We had this really interesting one even just last week when we were talking about interior design. We had an art advisor here saying that interior designers now are going into the buying and selling market,
yes.
but not necessarily thinking themselves as an art market professional, but they're participating in it and they're becoming part of it. Then there's a whole really wide area that
That's
could be.
That's a really interesting one.
Yeah, it is a fascinating one. Yeah.
Because they wouldn't also necessarily be aware of. They could be an art market participant and caught by the anti-money laundering regulations.
Yeah, because they're not going through any of that at all. They're not looking at that due diligence in any way, because they don't think they have to, because they think they're a completely different sector.
Yes.
So
it's worth
really,
looking. So it's worth looking at the list of in terms of the AML. You can actually go onto the government website. They actually, even if you say you made an error, you failed to register in time, but you rectified it pretty quickly, there is still basically there are lists of people who haven't complied and fines that are historic. So it's again a reputation issue.
It is,
for those, and certainly those. You're right. That interior designers or those that sort of operating as an agent. Some of those might be introducers, but lots are acting as agents. They're buying, selling, etc. Back-to-back transactions. They themselves could be caught.
It's a whole interesting
area.
And we haven't even really got onto you yet, and we're such a long way through it. So the art market, you are part of the art market and is making it more interesting. So there you were, back on Google in the early days. And accidentally typing in an art and law at the same time. My God, I mean that's just amazing that you did that, because clearly you're here now and keep doing that. But looking back at your younger self, I mean, I mean, obviously you didn't know much about the role then. It was all quite new. But what would you tell a younger generation, people coming into the business now, what it is?
So it's a fun thing. So I've got lots of, I've got a really good team, and we develop our team from within. So we have lots of homegrown talent that we develop up from in law firms, paralegals, with legal assistants, all the way through to sort of trainee solicitors that then become qualified and the rest of it. And the ones that are really interested in art law tend to split into ones that may be very academic, or ones that might think it's more to do with being around art. And the advice I always give is, first and foremost, you might have a passion for art and an interest in art, but you need to be a well-rounded lawyer, first and foremost. That's what you ought to provide. Sadly, I don't get to see art all the time, and that's
neither do we.
We
get to see the outside of boxes most of the time.
It's a joy. It's a joy when you get to. You know, I'm really privileged. I'm really lucky to have such an interesting area to work in. But the actual being around art happens to me. I'm quite envious of some of the because you send off some of the junior lawyers, say, to do a delivery up of artworks, and you're thinking, oh, so there you are, you're doing the paperwork in the office. But it's not being well-rounded lawyer first and foremost, and get as much experience around that area, and also immerse yourself in the art world.
Yeah.
It's about getting out there, seeing in your spare time art, etc. But for people coming, it looks like crestfallen that you're not going to be wafting around a gallery. No, you're not going to be wafting around.
No.
Let's not pay you for that. You're actually going to be drafting. You're going to be helping people with very difficult problems that happen to involve art. And often it's very emotive. They're taking it as personally as a divorce. We talked about the social relationships within the art world. If a deal goes wrong, at the same level of upset and anger, all these things come into play as something that may be deemed to be a bit more personal. It's very different to corporate law. Very different to corporate law. Our group sits within private clients, and it's the right place for that, because you need to have the same skill set. Lots of our clients want somebody to hold their hand through quite difficult situations in terms of art transactions and art disputes as well. As I said, it always comes down to reputation, it comes down to legacy. It's a bigger thing. Often the artwork's emblematic of something else.
What would you say are the biggest challenges that the art world is facing today?
UK, certainly Brexit has had a blow, so I'm keeping an eye on.
We experienced that, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
World events, I think across in all sectors, it's the turmoil of world events. You think one crisis and then there's another awful thing that happens somewhere else, and all these things have a ripple-on effect.
Yeah.
In terms of developments that may or may not be exciting, but are challenges, you've got obviously AI, and what that means in terms of protecting artists' rights and authorship. Brexit, not only for the import, export and delays, etc., and what that might cause, also in respect of the underlying laws. We talked about ARR, Austrian rights regulations, where they've obviously, it's due to the EU directive, so things like that will apply.
And obviously now as well, there are differences between the EU directives and presumably there are directives which are just specifically UK, which are not necessarily in line with anymore. So so that's those directives which are here need to either become. It's about compliance again, isn't it? And where those you going back, funny enough, it's really interesting what you said earlier on actually about. Hadn't quite appreciated when you said that it's not a regulated industry, and you said it is. It's actually extraordinary how regulated it actually is, because we've got our side, we've got customs, we've got shipping, we've got all of that to account for, and then from your side, there's a huge field just there in terms of regulation.
I think there is, and there
Yeah.
always has been. I think the fifth AML directive crystallised things around finances and also
Yes.
flows of money.
Yeah.
So one of the things that still makes people very jumpy, and I'm very regulated myself as a lawyer, and when we open a matter, you have to go through loads of compliance. Anything that touches me just always seems to have an immediate red flag. And I say, look, I'm just giving you a piece of advice here. It's not even about a transaction. So yeah, but it's about an artwork, and you know, we're concerned in terms of our compliance team, etc., etc. And there's the same kind of nervousness, I think, around anything to do with the art market.
Yeah.
Partly because the way it doesn't fit, it's a bit chalk and cheese like some of the more formal ways of doing business and contractual relationships, that people aren't comfortable that multi-million artworks are being typically sold in quite scant documentation in the past. That's changed quite a lot because of all the scrutiny in terms of flows of money. But now the key thing with flows of money is where is it coming from and where's your source of income for this particular purchase. And those are the conversations that dealers and art market participants are having to have, and also that we need to be comfortable with as well.
Exactly. I mean, you probably see these as well as I do. The number of emails in certain social scenes that go around saying I've got X number of artworks to sell, and by the way, I'll chuck in a Ferrari or I'll chuck in a whatever at the same time as a deal. Here's the provenance here, and you look at the files that are sent through, and they're just, I mean, they're woeful at best. I'm sure, you know.
Yes, I love something. They do what I love. I have some great ones where you get offered, will you help sell this particular collection, etc. And one, it won't be coming in the medium that it's being sent to. You know, it's like JPEGs on an email. And there's always that kind of story. I don't know whether it's true, but it's a good one. That you know, somebody is offered an artwork that's actually, they look up and it's actually already above their fireplace. So things are quite circular. So it is quite circular in terms of these kinds of scams.
Yeah.
And I get. If you get new clients in, you'll either find that somebody comes in that you think, well, what's your role? I know I'm just an associate, or they're very, very keen to sign up to you because they want the validation of the law firm. They want to be able to put you in copy. We also have a situation where people put you on copy without you being instructed, which really is very annoying.
That's a penalty.
Oh yes, and I'll stab out on that because it assumes knowledge of what's gone on ahead, and also validation of that correspondence.
Yeah.
And it also assumes that we've been instructed when we potentially haven't, and that I quash that very quickly because you don't know what you're being used for. People also are very keen. If no one's keen, obviously, to put money on account with professionals, really. But if they're uber keen, I'm always very suspicious. Or if they just agree and escort without questioning it.
The two ends of the spectrum to then really, fascinating.
Yeah. So I'm just very live. I'm always live trying to think that's a bit fraudy or
or anything which is just a little bit out of the ordinary. Having said that, of course, we are dealing with people who are usually quite wealthy and can spend money any way they think they like to as well. So, and tempting as well. So you kind of have personalities as well as everything else to deal with. I guess you have to make a judgment call really in terms of the personality and that's just them versus hang on a minute, that's not right.
I know I have quite a good radar now. Yes, I'm used to dealing with very colourful characters and those of
I mean, we all. I mean, it's one of the privileges of this world, isn't it? Really, that we live in. I'm so conscious that we're kind of the pizza coming in is usually a sign that we're getting quite close to time. But I wanted to before we get into open questions, I wanted to just ask a few other things of you, if you bear, which is. Let's have a look through. So we know, I think your mentor in the industry, I think we kind of covered that already more or less, but have you got anybody in particular that you...
In terms of mentor, there are lots of people that certainly influenced me in terms of obviously Karen, who I worked with, other lawyers, more senior lawyers within my firm. Lucky to have some leading female partners. Yeah. That's really important to me. Also Martin Wilson, who I work with as a co-chair, Phillips. But there's some really, certainly within the legal profession, I'd say, certainly within my firm, leading female partners that have led the way. And it's still quite at a senior level, quite a male dominated industry.
Yes.
Fortunately for legacy, that's changed a lot in terms of diversity, but it's a work in progress.
Positive? It's going in the right direction?
Yes.
I think definitely.
Oh, definitely. I don't think my generation would let it be anything else.
I agree. It shouldn't be anything else, but there is still clearly. Do you see that as a kind of filtering out aged professionals in a particular mindset and everything changing for the better as a whole?
Yeah, I think it definitely. I think you need to have a diversity of opinion, whether it's on boards of trustees or whether it's within an organisation. The strength and the plurality, can I say?
Yes.
Plurality of voices, exactly. Yeah.
No, I agree.
And it's great to see that my younger team members, they've got so much energy.
Isn't it?
Yeah, completely, and fresh ideas, and they see things from a different perspective, and that's important.
But there still are lawyers fundamentally.
Oh, completely. Yeah.
I mean, I'm conscious of time. I think we've kind of come close to the end of this session at the moment. I just really wanted to open it up to any other particular questions. I mean, I could go on. I'm going to really have to sort of do this again at some point. We're going to do a round 2 on this at some point. But right now, Paula, if you want to speak up loud so people can hear.
So a few years ago, I had another talk with a lawyer, and there was really just a conversation about us being middle party between galleries, auction houses, and final clients, and clients using us as storage. We have a lot of clients who keep hearing things for years and years. So when it comes to like the due diligence and trying to sort of understand where the artworks come from, where it's going to, why we're holding it here, and liabilities that we have over that immediate party, what do you think is like what we need to be doing in order to protect ourselves from anything, for example, fake work of the story that we don't know about? Because we trust that the galleries, the auction houses, and the clients that we work with will provide us with all the correct information, but that not necessarily might be the case. There's a lot of private clients who might buy it from anyone, store it here for a few years, and then decide to sell it. So in that in between, what should we be doing, do you think, to protect ourselves?
It's an interesting one because you're kind of not in the conversation, because these disputes, say it was a fight about fate or ownership or anything, isn't your argument. You're a third party that happens to be storing the work or shipping the work, etc. And you want to make sure that that's ring-fenced and you're limiting your liability. So I'll be looking at your contracts and making sure that that liability is limited, because you don't want to be part of that conversation. Would be the obviously greater skill set here in terms of handling and all the rest of it. But at the very basic, you have a space, somebody wants to put their artwork in it, that the person who is storing that artwork, they may change in title, as long as you're comfortable about that transfer of title to them as the controlling party, and they're going to pay fees, etc. for storage. That's pretty much as far as it goes. But debates around authenticity.
Just an example.
Yeah, I don't think you should be involved with anyway, because it's not your fight. It's nothing to do with you in terms of those wranglings. You shouldn't have to be involved with that. You need to make sure that's reflected in any agreements, that your role is X. It's ring-fenced, making sure something's safe and secure in your.
But that actually does open up an interesting question in itself. So, say for example, something is reattributed to being more valuable than it would have been when it was introduced into storage space. Yeah. Is that still so? In the first instance, I'm just thinking about conditions and storage conditions. If something's sort of stored in one particular way, and then there's a reattribution, and it said actually it should have been stored in that way, that wouldn't. I mean, we're just purely a third party in that as well. So we can then put it into the correct conditions, but it wouldn't have been on us in the first place necessarily. I
think again you need to look to the contract about what happens in the event of, say, a change of circumstances.
Yeah.
And how much would it shift, say, from being
Well, it could
into
go
controlled
from
conditions to uncontrolled
yeah, it could go from
conditions?
ambient conditions
Right, okay,
where you
so-
temperature fluctuations, which
Yeah.
may degrade something of which is of a higher value, and then it's discovered to be actually it should really have, over the past X number of years it's been in storage, it should have been under these conditions, which that's not really on us then, is it? Or
well, if it depends what the contract says, because if the
Exactly,
contract
yeah.
says
Yeah.
it should be controlled in conditions because
well,
of X,
clearly, but
then
if in the first instance it hadn't said that, hadn't stated that, and an ambient had been okay.
but I think
Yeah,
it's still,
it's
if I was
interesting.
I might be saying I came to you because I wanted it to be stored in appropriate conditions for what have you. And then the argument back would be, well, it was, but then it changed its.
Yeah,
So again, you need to be very careful within your contract,
Yeah.
your contract with the person.
yeah,
Because I don't know when you get, say for example, say I have an amazing painting, I said, well, and you'd say to me, right, that should be secured at this particular temperature. And I said, I'm not interested in that, I just want it stored in the garage.
yeah,
It's ultimately up to me. I
Yeah.
thought as the owner, if I want it stored in whatever temperatures without control, that's up to me.
yeah.
We need to make sure that that's documented, and that's agreement that
Absolutely.
I want it stored just in the garage as opposed to climate control is properly recorded to protect you.
Precisely.
So I think again it comes down to what's the contractual arrangement, and also how are things recorded, because things can be here, I suppose, for a number of years. People can come and go, and you want to make sure there's a clear record of the conversations with the client or the person who is the person who's controlling the relationship with the artwork being stored, on what those changes of circumstance are and how it's discussed, because you might have a variation of contract as well. You might change